Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
The Enclave, and by extension the US government, had made an unfathomable amount of scientific discoveries during their time in power, be it pre-war or post-war, including but not limited to FEV, nuclear fission core technology, power armor, and tons of different models of autonomous robots. Some of these breakthroughs were extremely positive for society, like the design and implementation of fusion cores as a way of easing the demand for oil and coal, though the discovery was implemented too late. Others ended up causing more pain and suffering than previously imaginable. Today, we're going to be looking into the story of the Enclave iBot, specifically one in particular, EDE, or Eddie, and their journey across the country in the wild post-apocalyptic world. The journey of the iBot starts in the lab of a little-known company by the name of Robco Industries, and the watchful eyes of their ever-vigilant CEO, Mr. Robert Edwin House. If you want some background on this legend of a man, check out my video on Mr. House and his 200-year struggle. The iBot was a massive success before the war, being designed and used as a mobile radio and television antenna array, which was so strong that it'd be able to receive signals underground, allowing access to information anywhere you want. The US government saw a greater purpose for these machines. They would quickly begin to purchase them en masse and retrofitted them to fulfill their nefarious tasks. These robots were designed to roam around a designated area, blasting whatever station it was set to until it ran out of power. Thankfully for the iBots, and the Enclave, those miniature fusion reactors pack quite a punch, so they never did run out of power, allowing them to be used by the US government as propaganda machines even 200 years after the war had ended. Most notably being used by the Washington division of the Enclave to promote their president John Henry Eden, who as fate would have it ended up being a sentient AI, a horrendous amalgamation of past US presidents, ideals, and philosophies.
We stand now at the precipice. Our great nation once more threatens to crumble, to topple into the sea of lawlessness and despair that have ruled us all for over 200 years. In short, my dearest America, we are at war. Even as I speak these words, fearless Enclave soldiers are fortifying their positions at the great water purifier, bracing for an inevitable assault. The Brotherhood of Steel, in their arrogance, has claimed Project Purity as their own. They would steal the Enclave's work, steal America's water. Only a matter of time before the traitors march on the purifier and attempt to take it by force. Let them come. Wave upon traitorous wave will crash against the Enclave's walls. The Brotherhood of Steel will fail. All those who oppose the Enclave will fail. I am President John Henry Eden, and this is my pledge.
The iBot would also be equipped with a standard facial and auditory recognition software, allowing it to serve the function of an unmanned forward scouting drone, being used both in the front lines against the Chinese and their own citizens, finding great use in the American occupation of Canada against their numerous insurgency groups. A fun little side note here, in the pre-war United States, there was a hit TV show which popularized the iBot in American culture. The show was named Ralphie, the Robot's Incredible Odyssey, a story about a rogue iBot who escapes a military base, following his travels across the world while evading capture from the evil General Winters. Being a kids show, plenty of iBot toys were produced and still remain in the wasteland 200 years later. Fun fact, the intro theme song is a digitalized version of Jingle, Jangle, Jingle, which I don't think I need to give you any background on. If you've ever played Fallout New Vegas, you already know the song. The Great War would slow down the development of the iBot, but with it being the perfect scout for the wasteland, would never fully axe the program, becoming synonymous with the Enclave in the post-war years. The Enclave wouldn't attempt to upgrade or modify the iBots in any way for many years. That is, until they decided they would try and develop an improved iBot, starting the program in 2275. The location? Adams Air Force Base. The prototype? iBot duraframe Subject E, also known as EDE. The Enclave scientists would take the original iBot design, the one seen across the wasteland, and plan to make the units better at surviving the dangers of the new world. Under the leadership of the Enclave Colonel Augustus Autumn and the watchful eyes of scientists Dr. Whitley and Dr. Grant, two senior Enclave science officers who were very well known in their fields of study, the project would progress steadily. if very slowly. With the current war against Elder Lions Brotherhood in Washington, D.C., the Enclave had to focus their resources on projects with more immediate payoffs. As the Brotherhood was pushing the Enclave forces closer and closer to Adams Air Force Base, Colonel Autumn would call for the cancellation of this project. The resources and personnel from the duraframe iBot program were reassigned, being used to continue the production of the Hellfire armor variant, which was used actively in the defense against the Brotherhood of Steel. This would also mean the disassembly of all iBot variants. Dr. Whitley, the main researcher for these iBots, wouldn't take the news lightly, fighting until the last moment to save his work that he saw as invaluable to the war effort. Whitley would in fact be so bitter about the cancellation that he would save one unit, sending the prototype across the country, hoping he could pass on his work to the Western Enclave. He uploaded the bot with all the available data on Poseidon Energy, the iBots, and the duraframe project, before sending it on its way to Navarro, an Enclave base located on the west coast of the former US, the biggest Enclave outpost on the continental United States. This iBot, the last of its kind, was the same lovable companion we all know from Fallout New Vegas.
Lay the forbidden note.
Before the eventual escape from Adams Air Force Base and destruction of all iBot prototypes, EDE would spend most of his time with Dr. Whitley, watching that old pre-war show Ralphie and his journey across the world. Okay, so wait a minute here. We have an iBot who was locked up in a military facility, managed to escape the compound, and who had to go on a cross-country adventure while on the run from the military. Okay, wait, am I reading this right? I feel like I'm getting deja vu here. Yep, so EDE did follow in the footsteps of that TV robot, escaping his masters and becoming a real-life embodiment of him. Guess watching that old TV show on repeat managed to rewire his personality matrix, slowly adopting the traits of Ralphie himself. EDE would consider Dr. Whitley like a father to him, or as close as he could get. After all, he was just a robot. This meant that when leaving his old friend behind, he had to say goodbye to his only family. You can tell this affected EDE greatly, considering he still keeps numerous recordings of his time with the Doctor on his personal databanks. Even though the Doctor implanted those files into the drives, EDE still seems to feel sad when hearing his voice again. The iBots were given an AI module, which made them more effective in battle, but also had the side effect of providing the bots with a new sense of self. During his travels across the country, EDE would begin feeling happiness and sadness towards his former life with the Doctor, missing his creator, the closest thing he ever had to a father. On this journey, EDE would make a stop at a secret Enclave outpost located in Chicago, Illinois. The robot would be spotted by a young man named Tommy, who would convince his father and mother to take in the damaged robot. You see, Tommy was a big fan of the show Ralphie, being that the Enclave had the only surviving archives of the show. He had always dreamed of having an iBot of his own. EDE would stay with the family for a short time, where he managed to recharge, get repaired, and prepare for the final half of his journey. After a few months of traveling west, EDE had finally reached Nevada, the location of Navarro. This sense of accomplishment wouldn't last long for the little robot, as shortly after crossing state lines, he would be shot by a raider, being hit by two 308 sniper rounds. This was enough to permanently damage some of EDE's systems, causing it to shut down indefinitely. He was lucky though. A regular iBot wouldn't have survived the first bullet, let alone a second shot. Guess those Enclave guys were onto something. Too bad they couldn't see the project through to the end. EDE would shut down near the settlement of Prim, later being picked up by an unknown courier and taken in town to the Mojave Express, the local post office. He ended up staying there for months, while the owner of the local post office, Jonathan Nash, would attempt to repair the unit with no success. He had hoped to use the iBot for deliveries, but never got the chance, and that's where he was left, sitting on the counter of the local Mojave Express. At this point, it doesn't seem like he'll ever be able to make it to his destination of Navarro. That was until the Courier 6 shows up in town in search of his attempted killer Benny. The Courier would clear out all the local convicts who had set up shop in town, allowing the residents of Prim to return to their normal life, as they had been holed up in the local Bicky and Vance casino for weeks. The local NCR militia force was unable to help out the town under orders of their military command. The NCR didn't have enough forces to hold their small outpost, let alone assault Prim. With a little bit of jerry-rigging using extra parts and some scientific knowledge, the Courier would manage to repair EDE, getting their systems back online for the first time in months, if not years. Before we unravel the story behind EDE and the Enclave, I want to bring up a few fun facts and stories about the doomed research project. The various factions of the Mojave wasteland are confused about what the iBot is, being less common out in the Midwest and Western coast. Some even are intimidated by the robot, expressing their discomfort when forced to be near the robot. The more civilized people of the wasteland, like the Garrett twins, owners of the Atomic Wrangler Casino in Freeside, will find it odd to see one, but won't see anything out of the ordinary, with the boomers of Nellis Air Force Base being extremely extremely intrigued by the robot, going as far as to ask the courier if they can take the robot off their hands, so that they can study the technology inside. Boomers, being a technologically advanced settlement originating from Vault 34, they weren't intimidated by tech, but embraced it for what it was, a way to survive through the apocalypse. Other less advanced groups, such as Caesar's Legion, show signs of discomfort being around the robot, with EDE being as technologically advanced as he is, and the Legion being so underdeveloped in science and technology. The iBot was such a foreign concept that barely any of the Legion forces even knew what it was, let alone how it worked. The fear of the unknown is a powerful one that clearly shapes the view of the average soldier on modern technology. Groups such as the Fiends, on the other hand, didn't seem to be intimidated by the robot, but more confused on what it even was, whether that was due to a lack of technological knowledge or the massive amount of drugs the gang is on. Either way, EDE was a rare sight to see in the Mojave wasteland, one that attracts tons of unwanted attention. There were a total of 2 audio logs that Dr. Whitney had buried in their programming. Both of these logs were from EDE's time at Adams Air Force Base. The first one being Dr. Whitley introducing himself, followed by him desperately pleading to anyone who's listening to continue his research of the duraframe Eyebots.
Subject E, diagnosis complete. Begin recording. My name is Whitley. I'm a researcher at Adams Air Force Base. Until recently, I was in charge of the duraframe reinforcement project for the combat model Eyebots. iBot duraframe Subject E is both the prototype and the last functional model in this test group. I was prepared to make several significant upgrades to the machines. However, as the project was canceled and all duraframe assets are being diverted to Hellfire armor, I am sending this model to the Navarro outpost. If you're listening to this log from one of our Enclave outposts in Chicago, give this unit whatever repairs it needs so it can continue to Navarro.
The second log was supposed to be for when EDE reached Navarro, and is Whitley informing the new scientist of what the robot represents and the information it contains, including tons of info on the local company Poseidon Energy.
Download complete. Begin recording. Navarro outpost scientist, I am glad that EDE has reached you. You will find several data banks of information on this machine. Please handle this information with the utmost care, as it represents the sum total of the results of my research on the duraframe Eyebots. There are also several data banks with information on my research into Poseidon Energy, and some projects they were working on in the Mojave area.
It turns out, these logs weren't playing at random, but were triggered by code words that the Doctor only thought the Enclave would know. If the Brotherhood of Steel or the followers of the Apocalypse find out about the vast amount of information EDE has stored away, they're definitely going to come knocking on the courier's front door for answers. If they did though, followers might actually end up doing some good for the wasteland. Dr. Whitley would finally get his research continued, EDE would finally get some friends made, and the followers could develop their energy tech for the NCR. On the other hand, if the Brotherhood gets their hand on the data, that could spell the end for EDE's journey, leaving the Brotherhood with the research and the wasteland no better than it started. Legend has it, when they did eventually find out about EDE being in the Mojave, the followers and the Brotherhood both reached out to the courier with an offer too good to refuse. According to the stories, the followers offered to upgrade EDE's weapon systems in exchange for the information, while the Brotherhood offered to let the courier keep the robot and to finish the armor upgrade that the Enclave started so many years ago. Even though it may seem like the end of the line for EDE and the duraframe iBot project, it would have one more moment in the spotlight, taking the project even further than the Enclave ever could have. It wouldn't end with EDE, or at least the EDE that we've come to know. In the next episode, I'll be covering the iBot's massive impact on the newly created nuclear hellscape of Hopeville. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to stick around.